There is something in the hobby, something that I haven't done in a long time. And as the red fog began to retreat from the shores of Lake Dormant, it revealed an opportunity for me to finally paint some fantasy models, and maybe use more brushwork instead of my usual spraying of chipping liquids over the sci-fi armor. I'm Martin, and you are watching Wardrobe Workshop. I've been interested in the system ever since I first saw the Warcrow models. But this new release has me even more excited. It includes 2 armies, and perhaps one of them can bring my grimdark brush skills back to life. #elf necromancers. Inside the box there are cardboard terrains that you need to assemble. Watch out when locking the parts together, as they require a bit of force. Other than that, the setup is straightforward. You will also find tokens, measuring tools, dice and even gaming mat. Everything 2 players need to enjoy the game. One of the factions is Feudum, humans inspired by medieval history, but the second are dark-minded, elves and humans called Yaldabaoth.
Scions of Yaldabaoth.
As I learned about the lore behind their units like Needle, who repairs and animates dead bodies on the battlefield, or the Uruk, an elf who turned himself into a 6-armed demon-like creature through various experiments. I knew this army was my perfect match. It's an opportunity for some grimdark paint jobs, but also a great challenge. Before that, I needed to assemble the models. Warcrow miniatures comes in 2 materials, injected thermoplastic and plastic resin. I started with the Intacts, aka Chicken Warriors, humans who decided to join the ranks of the Scions, but haven't yet received any bodily modifications, so to honor their leaders, they cover themselves in chopped corpses of battle victims, like these hands attached to their shoulders. I really enjoyed all the details of the figures, some especially more than others. Injected thermoplastic, the grey plastic that the Intacts are made of, was not responding well to scraping and sanding. Instead, it's better to slice off any mold lines or sprue residue with the sharp hobby blade. But it's also worth pointing out that there isn't much cleanup needed. I decided to try sanding anyway, and it worked to some extent. But since injected thermoplastic can't be dissolved with plastic cement, I couldn't easily get rid of tiny flakes of plastic. The bluish plastic resin that hero miniatures are made of is a different story. It was super easy to sand, even without applying pressure. I just gently cleaned the surface where I managed to find a lonely mold line. It was crazy how clean and detailed these minis are. Uruk's leg was bent a little, but I managed to straighten it out by sticking him on top of the still water bottle for a while, so the plastic resin would remember the new shape. In case you need to adjust something, you can apply some heat with the hairdryer, which will make the part more maneuverable. To glue the minis, I used CA glue. I put few drops on a plastic bag and use a toothpick as a precise applicator. This way I can avoid gluing my fingers, or getting ugly glue marks on the models from too much glue squeezing out of the joint. The Chicken Warriors were a little tricky with how the heads and arms are separated. I also painted some CA glue over the edges, where the post-sanding surface wasn't looking that great, to even out loose plastic particles. It was beautiful to watch how the bluish models of Needle, Uruk and Breath are coming together. Dry fit them first, because once the glue sets, it's not coming apart. Honestly, the photos and videos don't really reflect how amazing these miniatures are. When I was putting the figures together, I also used CA glue as a gap filler, if needed. And after it dried out, I sanded it flush with the model's surfaces. You can also use CA debonder to blend over the joint. Priming will reveal if anything more is needed. For the bases I wanted to match the box theme and create reddish water effects with epoxy resin, which will look like remnants of the red fog. I found an STL file for recessed bases. These bases will work like container for the epoxy resin, so I won't need to make any molds or frames. In Slicer I resized them to fit Warcrow 30mm base size, and I printed 3 samples with Black Pet G in 0.1mm layer height. The size was spot on, and after some fitting I went with the lowest one. Next, I picked some plastic stone to put under Uruk's feet, raising him a little to stand higher over the water level. I glued everything together with sea glue and sprinkled some sand on the bottom. After that, I took a few dried rose flower roots and fixed them to the base, making them look like fallen branches, roots or some dead vegetation sticking out from under the rocks. To finish this step, I sprinkled a mixture of tiny stones and sand, leaving room for the epoxy to be poured in after the painting. In case you would like to get Scions of the Dormant starter set, the pre-order starts from July 28th and will last until August 4th. You can also get an additional expansion, Beyond the Scions of the Dormant, or even a free limited pre-order exclusive mini, Sizigian, for the Feudon faction. To learn more about Warcrow and this set, visit the Corvus Belli website, link in the description. Last time I painted a naked fantasy model with these paints. Do you remember this? I can still sense the flesh wash smell. Yeah, I had a big break in painting, and after I got back to the hobby, I was mostly interested in sci-fi armored machines, until I saw Warcrow. After spraying the model with black primer and base tones of violet, red and greenish grey, it was time to stack bonuses. Normally I use techniques that don't necessarily require precision. Oil washes, chipping liquids and weathering, in general, are messy by definition. So grabbing a brush in order to lay the first highlight layer was almost like doing it for the first time. I had some vision though, and I knew I wanted to concentrate the brightest colors in the center of the mini, trying to build as much contrast and muscle definition as I could. I focused on what I thought was the right highlight placement, rather than making it smooth. I didn't have any specific idea in mind for his bone-like structure and the waist, so for now I painted it with grey mixed with neutral flesh tone. I did the same with his spine, following up with nude oil wash. With gold metallic paint I covered his bracelets. I was happy with how his chest and smaller muscles turned out, but I couldn't say the same about his back. I missed a ton, adding too much flesh tone to the mix, and the layer structure was not smooth, so I tried to correct the tone, resetting the step with grey color through the airbrush. With pink contrast paint, I sprayed the tissue on his waist, as well as over his spine, the bases of spikes on his elbows and under armpits, which I overdid, but it was too late. I also darkened his feet with dark brown ink. After that, I laid the first highlights on the horns and spikes. I painted the stones on the base, adding color shifts with green and blue, highly watered down paint to a glaze-like consistency. letting it concentrate in the recesses, achieving a mossy appearance. I treated the roots the same way, and I also picked out a few tiny stones with touch of color so they would be seen through the epoxy water. I used new nail wash over his bracelets as well as on his horns and spikes to darken them down. I brought some highlights back on his spine after the contrast paint step. I painted the final highlights on his horns and also on the other remaining details like daggers or the blood vessel he is holding. Lastly, I went back to the bracelets with gold metallic paint to apply final highlights after the nail oil and matte varnish dulled down the shine. After that, it was time for the epoxy resin. With a syringe, I poured 4 ml of resin and 2 ml of hardener into a small plastic container. I mixed both parts together, adding a dot of red paint with the point of a toothpick. When the mix was ready, I used a syringe to slowly fill the base. The epoxy, because of its consistency, likes to crawl up on the details it touches. And it ended up covering a little more than I originally planned. But I hope the ground will be still visible after it cures. After a few hours, when it started to harden, I used water effects from Vallejo and applied it on top of the resin. I applied it in a way that it forms delicate waves. The last step was to add and paint moss. And the model was done. Thank you Corvus Belli for bringing back my interest in fantasy miniatures and this awesome game. I really appreciate the rules, which are easy to understand on the first read, and I like how they help to immerse in the universe. I know it's maybe not a golden demon level, but I feel like I'm close to how I would like to be painting. I'm especially happy with how his chest and hands turn out, with contrast, definition and coloring the shadows. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It was Martin from Wardrobe Workshop. See you in the next one.